stress will have an impact on your reproductive health and your ability to get pregnant. Your sex hormones and your stress hormones, such as cortisol and adrenaline, come from the same bucket, right? If we are prioritizing that yang, we're using all of that yin to create more and more yang, then we just don't have any yin left. And that yin is our sex hormones that, again, are needed for reproduction and pregnancy. What happens a lot of the times for women is we are so used to being in this stressed out, anxious state that we don't even realize we're stressed a lot of the time. But just because we don't realize it doesn't mean our body doesn't realize it. We need to get our bodies out of constantly being in that state, right? Constantly craving that state of stress and anxiety. Today, I want to talk about how stress and anxiety affects fertility. And if you were not aware of this fact that stress affects fertility, let's just clear that up right now. Stress will have an impact on your reproductive health and your ability to get pregnant. But I'm also going to share with you how you can reduce stress in your life and, more importantly, in your body, in your physical body, so that the stress that you're having every day isn't so much affecting your fertility and your health. And I really want to explain how stress affects fertility and how stress affects your body overall in a really simple way that everyone can understand, right? You should not need a degree in medicine to understand your body and what's going on in it. And if you're watching this video right now on YouTube or something, instead of just listening to it on a podcast, you might notice that my background today is a little messy. I'm in my son's bedroom. This is not the most ideal place, right? Not the prettiest background to record a podcast. Usually I'll do it in my office, my working office as an acupuncturist, and I'll have to move things around and set up a podcast studio. And quite honestly, that's all stressful. And I didn't feel like doing that today. So I didn't. And this is just an example of ways, small ways to start off that you can reduce stress in your life. But that being said, I will never give advice that I haven't done, that I wouldn't do, that I am not currently doing. So to start off, let's talk about what stress is. Now, when I'm talking about stress, I classify it as anything that gives you worry or anxiety, anything that brings fear to you. So pretty much worry, anxiety, and fear, and overwhelm. Overwhelm is a big trigger for stress, right? Having too much to do and not enough time. And stress can look different for different people and even at different times and parts of your life, right? When you're a student, stress might be getting an A on a test or getting your report in on time. And personally, when I worked in so I used to work in marketing before I became an acupuncturist and Chinese medicine practitioner. And when I worked in marketing, my stress was things like getting to work on time and giving big client presentations or not fucking up a transaction that would lose a client millions of dollars, all realistic things, right? Getting all my deliverables and work done by a certain deadline that everything is needed. Those are all common things that cause people stress. And now as a mother, a lot of my stress comes from my children, quite honestly, and mainly overwhelm, like, do I have food to feed them? What am I going to make for dinner? Are they signed up for their classes, et cetera, et cetera? Like, who's my childcare going to be when they're sick, right? So stress can look like different things and show up different ways to different people. Now let's dive into how stress affects the body and specifically fertility. And to start off, I'm just going to give you the Western medicine overview, and I'm just going to read this to you real simply. So in terms of ovulation, elevated cortisol can affect ovulation. Stress can suppress the surge of LH necessary for ovulation, leading to cycles when you don't ovulate, right? And obviously, if you're not ovulating, you can't get pregnant. Now, stress can also affect things like progesterone, which are really important, especially in that second half of the cycle. So under stress, the body may divert the precursors for progesterone to produce more cortisol. Since progesterone is key for the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, right? That second half of your menstrual cycle after you ovulate, this can further disrupt menstrual irregularities and affect overall reproductive health, right? Meaning you might not have enough progesterone to hold that second half of your cycle, the luteal phase, leading to luteal phase defect. Now, that is the wordy Western medicine way of explaining to it. Maybe that makes sense to some of you, but I want to explain it from a Chinese medicine perspective because I think this makes so much more sense. So from both a Western and Chinese medicine perspective, your sex hormones and your stress hormones, such as cortisol and adrenaline, come from the same bucket, right? They come from the same resources. So if you're producing too many stress hormones, such as cortisol and adrenaline, then you don't have the resources. You don't have enough left in your bucket to create those sex hormones, such as estrogen and progesterone, that are needed for a healthy menstrual cycle and a healthy pregnancy. Now, in Chinese medicine, we correlate this to yin and yang. So yin is sex hormones, such as estrogen and progesterone, and yang is those stress hormones, such as cortisol and adrenaline. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Chinese medicine, yin is also rest. It's nighttime. It's the thick fluid in your body that is used to produce hormones. It's also a cooling aspect of the body, whereas yang, it's daytime, it's activity, it's work, it's social life. It is everything else. It's energy, right? And we need yin, right? We need that rest and restoration to have the energy to create yang, to create that energy and working and having fun and all the things. And ideally, we want our yin and yang to always be in balance. We want our yin, our rest and restoration, to be in balance with our activity, our yang. What happens is when we use too much of that yang energy, that cortisol, that adrenaline, that like rush, that burst of energy, it depletes our yin energy because again, they're coming out of the same bucket. We need yin to create yang. So if we are prioritizing that yang, we're using all of that yin to create more and more yang, then we just don't have any yin left. And that yin is our sex hormones that, again, are needed for reproduction and pregnancy. So what happens when you are stressed, it puts your body in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, right? A stress response. And that stress response is, again, yang energy. And when our body is in that state, it's extremely depleting on our resources being yin, the substance needed to create sex hormones. It's also really depleting on our blood. And blood is a huge part of our menstrual cycle, right? We need our blood to circulate properly to even have a menstrual cycle. And then our body needs to double blood volume in order to hold a healthy pregnancy. So it's that idea that after, something that's really stressful, so a big presentation that you're really stressed about or a really stressful and long day of work, you might either feel exhausted, right? Because you've depleted all of your energy, or you might actually be even more wired because we don't have that yin energy. We don't have that thick substance, that cooling, that nighttime energy to bring down our yang, to hold down that yang energy because we've depleted it so much. Stress will also affect our eating habits, right? So a lot of times if we're stressed, we won't be able to feel our hunger cues. We won't be able to eat when we're hungry. And if we're not eating when we're hungry, not only does that affect our blood sugar, which affects our entire system, especially our reproductive system, but it also means that we're not feeding our bodies enough. We're not feeding our bodies enough nutrients so that we have the resources our body needs to create those hormones that are necessary for reproduction. And I feel what happens a lot of the times for women is we are so used to being in this stressed out, anxious state, right? This depleting yang adrenaline state that we don't even realize we're stressed a lot of the time. But just because we don't realize it doesn't mean our body doesn't realize it, and our body's staying in fight, or freeze, which is depleting. And we need to get our bodies out of constantly being in that state, right? Constantly craving that state of stress and anxiety. Because yes, we do crave stress in a way. As silly as it sounds, that adrenaline rush feels good. We might not like the fact that we're stressed, but we do like that adrenaline rush that comes with it. It's the same reason that people go for high intensity workouts or do ice baths. It's because we want that rush of feel good energy, which it feels good in the moment, but again, it's overly depleting to our bodies in the long run. So we understand now that stress affects our menstrual cycle and our reproductive health and our fertility. But I would be an asshole if I just stopped there and just told you that stress affects your fertility and left it as that, right? Leaving you feeling more anxious about the fact that you're stressed. So let's talk about actionable ways that you can reduce your stress and anxiety in your life and ultimately heal it in the long run. So first off, when you are feeling stressed or anxious or worried or overwhelmed, the first thing you need to do is notice it, right? We can't do anything about our emotions if we don't notice this. And I'm going to add emotions like sadness and anger and all of that into this bucket as well, because those will all cause stress on our bodies, right? So when we have these feelings of worry, of stress and anxiety and fear, the first thing you need to do is stop and notice it and allow your body to feel it. And yes, you heard me right. I am not telling you to take deep breaths. I'm not telling you to go meditate in a corner and sit in silence. I am telling you to feel what you feel, right? Allow yourself to feel that overwhelm. Allow yourself to feel that worry. Allow any negative thoughts to come up, right? I want you to allow the uncomfortable feelings to build up in your body. And what this does is that it allows our body to move through that stress response, to move through that state of fight, flight, or freeze instead of getting stuck in it. What happens when we either just completely ignore what's going on in our body or we try to breeze through it to quote unquote calm our nervous system is that we just push those emotions further into our body, right? We leave our body in this stressed out state, and leaving your body in a stressed out state long-term is severely depleting on the body. So the best way not to stay in that state of stress is to allow yourself to feel the stress. And it can feel scary at first, especially if you did not grow up in an environment where you felt safe to feel your feelings, or you're currently in an environment where you don't feel safe to feel your feelings. And when I say this, you don't need to yell, you don't need to scream, you don't need to stomp or kick. You just need to sit there and feel the energy in your body, right? It usually feels like a heat rising, or it feels like a contraction. It does not feel good. But there is so much value in getting used to not feeling good and allowing it to pass. So I gave this specific technique to a fertility patient of mine the other day, and she started doing it, and she noticeably felt a difference within a week. And not only did she notice a difference, she wears the Oura Ring, which if you don't know, it measures your stress levels. And she noticed that areas that would normally show up as stressed were brought down to engaged. And engaged is so much better than being in a stressed state. So it actually physically made a difference on her body in a readable way that could show up in data. So to take it a little further, we now know how to work through our stress in the moment so that it's not lingering with us. But it's also, we don't want to live in a state, in a world, in a life where we have to constantly do this, where we are constantly trying to bring ourselves down from a stress response. So there's a couple of ways to do this, and these are not easy. I'm just going to say that off the bat. They are not easy, but they are doable because, again, I would not tell you to do anything that I don't personally do myself. And the first one, again, anyone can do. It's called I like to call it like a to-do list declutter. So you write down everything that you have to do in a day. And this is really helpful if you work in a high-stress job or overwhelm is a big part of what's causing your stress, right? So you're going to write down everything you have to do in a day or everything you have to do in a week, whatever perspective feels good for you. And then I want you to cross off anything that absolutely does not have to be done, right? So for example, let me think of something. My to-do list could be see 4 patients, record a podcast, send out a newsletter, and go to the gym, right? I have to see more of my 4 patients, not only because I love to do it, it's a part of my income, it's a part of my work, right? I don't have to do my podcast, so I technically could cross that off if I wanted to, and I don't have to do a newsletter, so I could cross it off. But getting those things done makes me feel better than not getting them done. So for me, I would cross out going to the gym, right? That's a busy day. I just don't have time to go to the gym, and I will make time for that exercise, for that workout on a day where I have more energy and I have more time and space in my life. Now, to you on that list, maybe going to the gym is your priority, but recording your podcast is not, right? Just example, obviously your day is not going to look like mine, but I want you to cross out at least one thing, ultimately 3, that you absolutely do not have to do that day. Maybe it's making dinner, right? You don't have to make dinner. You could order out if you have the resources. Maybe making dinner is a have to for you, but I'm just trying to give examples. And I think a lot of times what happens is we look at our day and we're like, no, absolutely, I have to do all of this. But really check in with yourself. Like, do you really have to do all of that? And I can almost guarantee you the answer is no. And then you want to take that list with the things you've crossed off and you want to circle anything that someone else could help you with, right? Anything your husband, your partner, your roommate, your neighbor, your parents, your family could support you with. So making dinner, again, as an example, I could ask my husband to do it. I could ask my husband to do the dishes. I could ask my husband to do the laundry, right? I can't ask him to treat my patients for me. But there are a lot of things I can ask him to do. And no, it might not be comfortable asking for help right away, but it is so important to do. You cannot do everything alone. You cannot do it all alone. And especially at work, right? If you feel like you're given more than you can handle, ask for help, right? Talk to your boss, talk to your coworkers, right? Be honest with where you are and who you are, and seek the support that you need. And so right there, you have a list that may have started at 10 things, but we've crossed off, 2 things you absolutely don't have to do and 2 things that someone can help you with. And now you only have 6 things on your to-do list. So already we've almost cut your to-do list in half, which will cut your overwhelm in half. Now, after you've done that, what you want to do is you want to look at one task at a time. And again, you don't need to write this out technically to do this, but whatever you're doing in your day, be present and focus on that one thing. So if you have 10 things to do, you don't need to constantly be thinking about 10 things to do and how there's like this artificial timer going off, right? You just need to focus on doing one thing. It's not going to make you quicker to be stressed out about it. It's not going to help you in any manner to be doing one thing, thinking about the 9 other things that you have to do. So simply focus on the one task in the present. So for example, when I'm treating a patient, I'm not thinking about the 5 other patients I have after them, right? I'm not thinking about my podcast. I'm not thinking about my newsletter. I'm not thinking about dinner or doing the dishes, right? And that might seem like a really easy thing because yes, I do need to be present in my work, but I could argue that everyone needs to be present in their work and whatever they're doing, even a simple task like washing the dishes. It is so important to be present with where you are. So ladies, if we did those 3 things alone, right? Notice when you're stressed, allow yourself to feel it and work through it. Do the, the brain dump or the declutter your to-do list. And then 3, be present in the moment with your activity. That would reduce your stress, your overwhelm, your anxiety, at least, I'm going to say 70 to 80% of the way. And for some of you, it might be even more than that. If you truly dedicate to doing that. And again, it takes time to master. You're not going to master it in one day, but do it consistently every day. And I promise you that this will reduce the stress in your mind, your physical and your physical body. And then last one, this is really like the Hail Mary of reducing stress in your life. And this is the one that definitely does not happen overnight, but it's working through the past trauma, your past experiences that are causing your stress and anxiety in the present in the first place, right? We are not triggered technically by things that are happening in the moment. We're triggered by a response that we gather from our emotions or thoughts and feelings from past experiences, right? So like when my daughter is throwing a tantrum because we are going through a very big tantrum, I'm not listening, no mommy, I'm a 13-year-old, even though I'm 4.5 stage, that is super triggering to me. But let's be honest, I'm not angry because a 4-year-old is yelling at me. A 4-year-old is supposed to yell at me. I'm angry because things happen in my past that put me up to feel unsupported and put me up to feel overwhelmed and put me in a state where I don't feel like people are listening to me. So when my daughter's not listening to me, that will drive me wild, right? What I found a lot in my practice is that women feel like they need to do too much because they feel like they're not worthy if they're not achieving. And yes, I don't feel like for most women, this is something that is consciously in front of their minds. But once we dig deeper into their history and what happened in their life, their family, their parents, their friendships, I find that this is the case. And this is true that if you have trouble sitting still, if you feel like you always have to be a yes person, always take on more projects, always do something for someone else, always be that people pleaser and never ask for help, there is a reason for it. And until you take the time to examine, right, where that reason is coming from, why you feel like you need to be doing more, you need to be achieving more to be worthy, you're going to constantly be triggered by it. And you're going to constantly send your body into this state of stress, of fight, flight, or freeze, or releasing cortisol and adrenaline. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can work through it. And this is like a huge part of my practice and what I work with women for fertility and reproductive issues is finding out where their triggers are, what is causing them stress and anxiety, and where is that sitting in their body. So this is the unique and really beautiful part of acupuncture and Chinese medicine is that we store our past experiences and our past emotions in different channels within our body. And by accessing those channels in our body, we're able to rewrite the script. We're able to rewire our energy. We're able to remove that trauma, remove those blockages. So we're able to see things in a different way. So there we have it. I think I'll end there. So to summarize, stress and anxiety does affect your fertility, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't need to be your capture, right? Allow your body to work through the stress by feeling the emotions. Allow yourself to declutter your stress and declutter your overwhelm by reducing things in your life that you actually don't have to do. Or also things that don't bring you joy, right? Like things that really suck to do that you absolutely don't have to do, just don't do them, right? Obviously, there are a lot of things in our life that we have to do, but you know what I'm talking about. And then lastly, work through any hidden, undiscovered trauma in your body and in your mind and life and mindset that might be causing those triggers for stress and anxiety in the first place. Now, if you want to learn more about how you can optimize your fertility and how you can reduce the stress and overwhelmed and stored trauma and stored emotions in your body, this is a big part of what I would do with women in my 3-month program called Femergy. It is a transformational program that will look at all areas of your life, all areas of your physical and emotional and spiritual being to really optimize your fertility, optimize your reproductive health, and optimize you as a person, right? So you can show up in the best light. So if you're interested in learning more about that, the information is in the show notes. You can always find me on Instagram at Manhattan Medicine Woman, and you can DM, reach out to me, link in my bio to figure out how to connect. So thank you and for listening, and I will see you next time.